On Friday afternoon, before 400 physicians, my sister stood on stage and scoffed. A small surgery, the words were cold steel. Then, the screen behind her flashed. The patient files she cited began updating automatically. New images, delayed orders, and revised notes appearing live. 400 people stopped breathing. The system itself was proving her wrong. My name is Sloane Hargrave. I am 34 years old, and I am sitting in the last row of the main auditorium at the Maple Ridge Convention Hall. Every breath I take is a negotiation with the rigid plastic brace strapped around my torso, a sarcophagus designed to hold my sixth, and hopefully final, spinal fusion in place. The air in the hall is thick with the smell of hotel coffee, wool suits, and the faint, citrus-based industrial cleaner they use to mask the scent of thousands of people. It is the state surgical conference, and the room is packed with over 400 of the brightest minds and steadiest hands in the region. On the stage, bathed in a spotlight that isolates her from the mortal world, is Dr. Rowan Foster. She is 32. She is the jewel of the Northlake Neuro Institute. She is my sister. Rowan is the keynote speaker. She is also the reason I am here. In the front row, my family sits beaming. My mother is clutching my father's arm, her head tilted at an angle of pure, unadulterated adoration. They are vibrating with pride. They drove 3 hours to see this. They are in the splash zone of her brilliance. I am in the cheap seats, or rather, the accessible seats. Row ZZ, right by the exit. The thick, unforgiving fabric of my sweater is already chafing over the fresh incisions, which are still weeping slightly, still angry. The brace, which I have worn in some form for the better part of a decade, feels different this time. It feels final. The scar tissue from the previous 5 surgeries is a tight, raised map on my back, and this new hardware, this new intervention, feels like it is pulling all of it taut. I can feel the phantom imprint of the stitches, even through the layers of gauze and clothing. The title of Rowan's address is projected on the 2 massive screens flanking her. Standards of Excellence in Surgical Candidacy. It is a title only a surgeon could love. It is also a lie. Rowan paces the stage with the predatory grace of someone who has never known failure. Her voice, amplified by the lavalier mic, is smooth, resonant, and confident. It is the voice of absolute authority. "We are in an epidemic of over-intervention," she announces. The room is silent, save for the quiet thwack of her heels on the stage. We, as surgeons, are the gatekeepers. We are the line between sound medical practice and patient hysteria. I feel a familiar tightening in my chest. I know this speech. I have heard variations of it across our dining room table for years. "We all see it," she continues, her tone shifting to one of conspiratorial intimacy with her 400 colleagues. The patient who comes in with a binder, the patient who has researched their own symptoms, the patient who is, quite frankly, addicted to the idea of being sick. My hands grip the armrests of the unforgivingly rigid chair. They collect diagnoses like charms on a bracelet. They demand tests. They demand procedures. They confuse pain with pathology. And it is our job, our duty, she emphasizes, tapping a slide that shows a complex decision tree, to say no, to protect these patients from themselves. A ripple of appreciative murmurs flows through the crowd. I see heads nodding. I hear the quiet, metallic click, click, click of retractable pens being deployed across the auditorium. They are taking notes. Then, she pauses. She takes a sip of water from the glass on the lectern. She looks out, and though she cannot possibly see me in the dimness of the back row, her gaze feels like a laser. It is a drain on resources. It is a failure of our core mission. We must be able to differentiate the patient who truly needs our intervention from the one who is simply seeking validation for what amounts to a small surgery. The words hang in the air. Small surgery. The auditorium, with its climate-controlled air, suddenly feels suffocating. My heart rate, which I monitor constantly, begins a slow, heavy climb. It is not a flutter. It is a drumbeat. Thump, 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 it beats against the inside of my brace. And as if on cue, the pain begins. It is not the dull ache of healing incisions. It is the other pain. The real pain. The one Rowan has dismissed as hysteria for the last 5 years. It starts as a low-frequency hum in my lower back, in the newly fused L3 and L4 vertebrae, and then it ignites. A sharp, electric current shoots down my right leg, bypassing the knee, and exploding in my calf like a flashbang grenade. My foot goes numb. I bite the inside of my cheek, tasting copper. I'm not imagining this. This is not hysteria. This is a nerve root, compressed and angry. Rowan moves to her next slide. It is a case study. Patient A. This patient, she says, her tone dripping with academic pity, presented with chronic, subjective pain, multiple prior interventions at other facilities, none successful. The patient was insistent on a diagnosis of instability, despite imaging that was, at best, ambiguous. I stare at the screen. The scans are anonymized, of course, but the text, the summary, it is familiar. This, Rowan says, is a classic example of surgical addiction, the desire for a fix, the refusal to accept conservative management. This is the profile of a patient we must guide toward psychiatric care, not the operating room. The crowd is with her. They are nodding. A vast ocean of bobbing heads, all agreeing that patient A is a lost cause, a drain, a liability. They are agreeing that I am crazy. I look away from Rowan, away from the nodding heads, and back to the massive projection screen. The entire conference is using a new, integrated software platform. It is a demo module for something called the Unified Medical Record System, a platform designed to sync patient data across multiple, incompatible hospital networks in real time, a single source of truth. The presentation slides are running inside this software's interface, and in the bottom right-hand corner, almost invisible against the deep blue background, is a small, 2-arrow icon, a synchronization symbol. It has been blinking, a slow, steady pulse, all morning. As Rowan continues to speak, outlining the psychosocial markers of patients like me, the icon's rhythm changes. It starts to pulse faster, blink, blink, blink. The air in my lungs turns to cement. I feel it, a change in the atmospheric pressure of the room, a tension, a gathering of energy. It is the same feeling I get in my spine just before a thunderstorm. A breaking point is coming. The foundation of the stage Rowan is standing on is about to crack. And I know, with a sudden, chilling clarity that cuts through the pain, that I did not have to do a single thing. She has done this all to herself. The vibration in my leg is not a memory. It is a live wire. As Rowan speaks, the current intensifies, a punishment for the crime of listening. 10 years ago, I was not this person. I was not a body trapped in plastic, sitting in the shadows. I was Sloane Hargrave, Esquire. I was a trial attorney. My body was just the vehicle that carried my mind. I worked 80-hour weeks fueled by cortisol and stale coffee, and my spine never uttered a single complaint. I lived for the fight, for the moment of cross-examination when you dismantle a witness not with volume, but with a quiet, precise sequence of facts. I built arguments that were airtight, structures of logic that left no room for doubt. My mind was a steel trap. Then, the steel in my own body began to fail. It started not as pain, but as weakness, a foot that would drag slightly after a long day in court, a sudden, searing jolt, like touching a live socket. When I bent to pick up a dropped brief, I ignored it. Lawyers are trained to ignore their own needs, but the body does not respect closing arguments. It delivers its own verdict. A progressive, degenerative spinal disease. That was the diagnosis. It was a slow-motion collapse, the vertebrae in my lower back slipping, grinding, and finally, narrowing the very channel that held my spinal cord. I was forced to leave my practice. The identity I had built, brick by logical brick, was bulldozed, and into that void stepped my family. In the Hargrave Foster cosmology, there were 2 stars, There was Rowan, the binary sun, a blinding prodigy of science and certitude, and there was me, Sloane, a dim, distant planet, characterized by one defining trait. I was the sensitive one. Rowan was the genius. I was the emotional one. Rowan was objective. I was subjective. When she excelled in organic chemistry, it was because she was brilliant. When I won my first mock trial, it was because I was so passionate. This dynamic, set in childhood, became lethal when I got sick. Rowan, by then, was in her neurosurgery residency, a rising star, a natural. She possessed hands that did not shake, and a mind that saw the body as a complex machine to be fixed. I was a machine she found faulty. I did not rush to surgery. Rowan's narrative on that stage is a fiction. I spent months, then years, chasing conservative treatments. I dedicated myself to it with the same obsessive focus I had once used for case law. I did physical therapy until the muscles in my core were rigid, but the pain only flared hotter. I had epidural injections, more than a dozen, the long needles sliding into my spine, providing relief that lasted sometimes a week, sometimes only an hour. I tried radiofrequency ablation, letting them burn the nerves in my facet joints, praying for a numbness that never fully arrived. I tried traction. I tried acupuncture. I tried an anti-inflammatory diet that starved me of comfort and joy. I did not want to be cut open. I fought against it, because I knew what it meant. I knew it was a Rubicon. The first surgery was a failure. The second was a revision. The third was a stabilization. Each one was a new betrayal, a new layer of scar tissue, a new level of agony. And through it all, there was Rowan, watching. I remember one Sunday dinner, 2 years ago. After the third surgery had failed to fuse, I was sitting on a specialized cushion, shifting constantly, the nerve pain in my legs so bright I could barely follow the conversation. I must have winced when I reached for the salt. Rowan put her fork down. The click of the silver against the porcelain silenced the table. "Are we going to do this again, Sloane?" she asked, not with sympathy, with clinical exasperation. I tensed. Do what? The performance, the theatrics, every time someone looks at you, you flinch. It's a classic feedback loop. I stared at her. It just hurts, Rowan. She gave a small, weary sigh. She looked at our parents, who were watching her, rapt. "It's pain theatrics," she said, the words echoing in the quiet dining room. "It's a behavioral issue. She has reinforced the pain pathways by focusing on them. It's somatic magnification. She expects it to hurt, so it does." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I am not imagining this." "I didn't say you were imagining it," she said, already cutting her food again. "I said it's behavioral. You need cognitive therapy. Sloane, not another scan." And the worst part, the part that still hollows me out, was the silence from our parents. My father cleared his throat and looked down at his plate. My mother, who had held my hand in the recovery room, just nodded slowly, absorbing her golden child's diagnosis. "Well," my mother said, forcing a bright tone, "if Dr. Rowan says there are other options, honey, maybe we should listen." Dr. Rowan. They absorbed her language as if it were gospel. From that day on, my pain was not a medical fact. It was a character flaw. They would ask, "Are you managing your stress, Sloane?" When I couldn't get out of bed, they would say, "You seem to be fixating, dear." When I described the numbness in my foot, they used her words: psychosomatic, subjective, fixation. Rowan had given them a medical, logical reason to dismiss the one thing that was destroying my life. She had pathologized my sensitivity. Every surgery after that was another crack in the foundation. Rowan's visits, when they happened, were not as a sister. They were as a skeptical consultant. She would stand at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, scanning my chart, her eyes narrow and assessing. She would ask the nurses about my pain medication requests. She saw me not as a patient, but as a problem. So I learned to stop talking about it. I built a fortress of silence. I stopped describing the pain. I stopped arguing. I let them believe what they wanted. I let them believe I was fragile, that I was broken, that I couldn't cope. I let them believe I was just the sensitive one, sitting at home, disabled and defeated. I never told them what I did after I could no longer be in a courtroom. I never told them that my legal mind, the mind they dismissed as passionate, had found a new home. I let them think I was unemployed. I let them think I was living off my meager disability insurance. It was easier. It was safer. It avoided the inevitable conflict, the accusations that I was being confrontational, that I was trying to compete with Rowan. My solitude became my armor. I learned to live inside my own head, with my own body as my only unreliable companion. The feeling of being judged, of being on trial for my own suffering, became a recurring nightmare. My family, the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor, had become the prosecution. And in that cold, isolated place, I realized something. Words are useless. Words like pain and agony are subjective. They can be dismissed. They can be labeled as theatrics, as sensitivity, as hysteria. Rowan used her words, her clinical, Latin-derived terminology, to strip me of my credibility. My mother and father used their words, their soft, concerned, dismissive platitudes, to reinforce the verdict. I had been a fool to trust words. I had been a fool to try and argue my case with emotion. My legal training taught me one immutable truth. When the narrative is against you, you do not argue the narrative. You attack the facts. You find the one, solid, undeniable piece of evidence that shatters the entire story. Data. I stopped believing in words and started believing only in data. An MRI is not subjective. A nerve conduction study is not sensitive. A timeline of failed treatments, logged in a medical chart, is not theatrics. I would no longer speak in the language of pain. It was a language my family refused to learn. The only language I would speak from now on, the only language I trusted, was the language of pure, cold, unassailable fact. The data would be my voice. The data would be my closing argument. My family believes I am a casualty. They picture me in my apartment, staring at the walls, a woman whose life ended when her legal career did. They see the brace, the disability checks, the slow, careful way I move, and they write me off as the sensitive one who finally, definitively, broke. They are, as they so often are, factually incorrect. My real life is a secret I keep not out of shame, but out of necessity. The specialized transport that picks me up 3 days a week does not take me to another physical therapy appointment. It takes me to the downtown offices of the Aurora State Medical Oversight Council, ASMOC. I am a senior counsel. My family thinks I lost my fight. I did not. I just moved the battlefield. My new courtroom is not paneled in mahogany. It is a sterile, gray cubicle. My new adversaries are not opposing counsel. They are patterns of negligence buried in terabytes of data. ASMOC is the body that licenses, regulates, and when necessary, crucifies every doctor in this state. My job, my real job, is to sit at the precise intersection of law and medicine, the very place my body was broken. I am the high-functioning analytical filter for the human wreckage that flows into our system. I review the whispered complaints from nurses too scared to go public. I analyze the insurance audits that show a surgeon with a 30% complication rate. I read the intake forms, scrawled in the shaking, furious handwriting of a widow, demanding to know why her husband went in for a knee replacement and never came home. I do not deal in emotion. I do not deal in theatrics. I advise on disciplinary hearings. I assess fitness to practice. I turn chaos, grief, and pain into neat, bullet-pointed memos, recommending suspension, revocation, or referral for criminal charges. My old life was about the performance of logic. My new life is about the cold, quiet application of it. 3 months ago, a file landed in the general intake queue. It was an anonymous complaint, which is not unusual. Patients are often terrified of retaliation. This one alleged a pattern of gross negligence at the Northlake Neuro Institute. It cited a specific physician, Dr. Rowan Foster. I felt the blood evacuate my head. The room tilted, and the familiar, sharp zing of nerve pain shot down my leg, as if my body knew, before my mind did, that the ground had shifted. I stared at her name, Foster. It was not triumph. It was not the click of a trap sprung. It was dread, a deep, cold, hollow dread that tasted like anesthetic. My world, which I had so carefully bifurcated, had just collapsed in on itself. I did not open the file. I did not read the details. I stood up, walked on legs that suddenly felt like glass, and went straight to the office of my director, Dr. Elias Martinez. "Elias," I said, my voice sounding distant. "A file just came in, case number 922. The physician named is Dr. Rowan Foster. She is my sister. I need a full, immediate, and permanent recusal." He just nodded, his face impassive. "Understood." Within the hour, the paperwork was filed. I was walled off. I was legally and ethically severed from the case. The system locked me out of the file, which was immediately reassigned to another counsel. I was not to be included in any meetings, any discussions, any emails. I did not see the patient's name. I did not see the specific allegations. I did what I always do. I followed the rules. But I am a senior counsel. I am not deaf, and I am not stupid. I could not see the file, but I could see the shockwaves it sent. I knew, from the whispers, that case file 922B was not an outlier. It was a flagship. It was the perfect example of a new, terrifying motif we had been tracking. The dismissal of symptoms pattern. It was a behavior we saw trending, almost exclusively among surgeons with high-volume, high-prestige practices. They would ignore patient calls. They would override automated alerts. They would receive post-operative images showing potential complications and sign off on them, unviewed, while adding a note that the patient's reported pain was subjective or anxiety-related. This pattern was the reason ASMOC had spent 2 years and an obscene amount of money developing the new Electronic Health Record Reconciliation module. It was an audit tool, a digital bloodhound, and I had been on the legal team that wrote the white paper justifying its creation. In the old days, a doctor's note was gospel. It was a static, legal document. But the new EHR systems, the ones that were supposed to make things better, had created a loophole. Doctors could now edit their notes, often days later, to match a better outcome, to cover a mistake. They could backdate their observations. Our new module made that impossible. We called it the audit channel. It was designed to catch the lies. It didn't just read the note, it cross-referenced the metadata. It synced the doctor's finalized note with the hospital's own server-side log. It could see if a doctor claimed they reviewed an MRI at 9 a.m., but the server log showed the file was not actually opened by that user until 11 p.m., after the patient had been discharged. It flagged every edit, every discrepancy, every instance where the physician's narrative did not match the system's raw, unchangeable data log. To power this tool, we didn't just ask for records, we subpoenaed them. We had terabytes of encrypted, back-end data from every major hospital system in the state, including Northlake. It was all legal. It was all procedural. And then, the coincidence. The State Surgical Conference, the very one I am sitting in, wanted to show off its new unified medical record system, the exact software on that screen. They wanted a partner to demonstrate interconnectivity and accountability, so they invited us, ASMOC, to demo our new audit channel, to show how our systems could talk. Our tech department, a division I have never spoken to, was tasked with preparing the data. They were told to pull 24 active, anonymized cases from our subpoenaed data pool. The cases were stripped of all names, dates, and locations. They were just code numbers, just raw data. Rowan's file, case file 922B, was one of them. I knew, in the abstract, that ASMOC was presenting a demo today, but I wasn't here for that. I was here as Sloane Hargrave, the broken sister, sitting in the back row, trying to show my family that I was supportive. But as I sit here, my spine a column of fire, I see it. I see the blinking synchronization icon. I recognize the software interface. I am listening to my sister present Patient A case that is, without question, the very one she is being investigated for, using the demo interface. And that interface is connecting, live, to the ASMOC server. It is syncing. It is running the reconciliation module. The breaking point is here. I did not plan it. I did not trigger it. I did not touch a single key. I just followed the rules. I recused myself. And now, the system I built my new life on, the cold, impartial, logical system of data, is about to do the one thing I could never do. It is about to execute its function. The spotlight was a clean, sterile white, and it made my brother, Rowan, look like a god, or at least, like a surgeon who believed he was one. He paced the stage of the keynote auditorium, a master of his domain, the prodigal son of neuroengineering, and the audience hung on his every word. I sat in the fourth row, a ghost at the feast. My name, Sloan Whitaker, a silent counterpoint to the one emblazoned on the massive screen behind him. Dr. Rowan Whitaker presents the Aegis Protocol. He was building to his crescendo. The Aegis Protocol was his baby, a real-time data validation system designed to, in his words, eliminate the friction between patient reporting and clinical reality. It was sleek, it was brilliant, and it was, I knew, built on a foundation of my own ignored research. But this was his show. The system is a mirror, he declared, his voice resonant in the hushed hall. It reflects the truth of the data, and the truth is what sets us free, but, he paused, a practiced, theatrical beat. The system cannot fix everything. He smiled, a tight, condescending curve of the lips I knew better than my own reflection. It cannot, for example, fix patients who want to be broken. A cold pebble dropped into my stomach. I knew where this was going. It can't fix the ones who see surgical intervention as a hobby, not a necessity, the ones who collect procedures like souvenirs. My breath hitched. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't have to. The insinuation was a guided missile, and the entire front half of the auditorium knew its target. They knew he had a sister who had, after years of his own department's misdiagnoses, required 3 corrective spinal surgeries. They knew it was me. A wave of uncomfortable, sycophantic laughter rippled through the rows. It was a strained sound, the noise of people who knew a line had been crossed but were too afraid of the speaker to call it out. I felt the glances, the quick, darting looks from colleagues. Dr. Chen, 2 rows ahead, pretended to study the program. A surgical resident I barely knew, seated 3 chairs to my left, made a poor show of coughing to hide his turn in my direction. I did not move. I kept my face a perfect, placid mask of professional interest. I would not give him the satisfaction. My hands were clasped in my lap, my spine straight. I was a statue of ice in a room suddenly gone too warm. Rowan basked in the awkwardness he had created, letting it hang in the air before he clicked the polished silver remote. Which brings me to my next point, data integrity. He clicked. The slide was supposed to change. It did. But something else happened first. In the bottom right corner of the 40-foot screen, a small, grayed-out icon, a circle of 2 arrows, suddenly pulsed. It turned a bright, clean, corporate blue. Beside it, text appeared, white, sans serif, and utterly damning. Reconciled. New artifacts detected. Rowan did not see it. He had already turned back to the audience, launching into his next prepared remark. But I saw it, and in the rows around me, I saw others see it. The whispering started, a low, sibilant rustle. As you can see, Rowan said, gesturing blindly at the screen behind him, in an anonymous case study, Subject 7 Alpha, we see a clear... My blood did not run cold. It evaporated. It turned to ash in my veins. I knew Subject 7 Alpha. I knew that case ID. It was Mrs. Gable, the 70-year-old woman who had been calling my office, weeping, For 6 weeks, the woman who said the post-operative pain was a fire and that the numbness in her left leg was worse. The woman Rowan's own department had dismissed in a curt email as a classic malcontent with somatic fixations. And he was putting her file on the screen. He was using her, in front of 2,000 of our peers, as his example of a difficult patient, a friction point. "We see a patient reporting," Rowan continued, his voice slick with confidence, "and we see a clinical reality. The data here is clean. The procedure was flawless." As he spoke, the Aegis protocol, his flawless, truth-telling system, began to work. Live. A new window overlaid the right-hand side of the slide. It was a log, a cascade of text. The system was, as the icon had promised, reconciling. It was pulling data from the hospital's central servers, the ones Rowan thought were firewalled from his presentation software. A line of text in his case study notes flashed, highlighted in blue. Note: patient complaint of post-op numbness. Dr. R. Whitaker. And then, directly beneath it, a new entry bloomed into existence. It was not in Rowan's clean, branded font. It was in the hospital's default, ugly system type. Flag, original MRI requisition, priority, delayed by S. A small spinning wheel appeared for a heart-stopping second, then resolved into text. 10 weeks. A collective gasp. Someone behind me swore, low and sharp. The screen refreshed again. The Aegis protocol was not done. It was, as my brother had promised, a mirror for the truth. Metadata. Note above edited by user R. Whitaker. Edit, timestamp. October 28th, 14:03 hours. Preceded by patient call log, urgent. Timestamp, 13:55 hours. Patient call log, urgent. Timestamp, 12:30 hours. Patient call log, urgent. Timestamp, 9:15 hours. The entire auditorium saw it. He had ignored a desperate patient's calls, 3 of them, all morning. He had only noted her complaint, the very complaint he was now mocking on stage. After her third call, editing the file 8 minutes later to cover his tracks, he had lied, and his own software had just exposed him. The clean dashboard he had been showing off, a field of placid greens and blues, suddenly erupted. It looked like a city grid burning. Bright red icons, flags, and warnings populated the screen, the system's automated diagnostics catching up with the new, raw data. Alert: critical discrepancy in clinician-reported outcomes. Patient log. Alert: manual override of mandated protocol timing. Flag: performance metric deviation. Patient follow-up, critical. Flag: data integrity compromised. The rustling was no longer a whisper, it was a wave. It was the sound of 2,000 professionals shifting in their seats, leaning in, pointing. It was the sound of a reputation catching fire, the sound of a career collapsing in on itself in the most public, technologically advanced way possible. It was the sound of wind rushing through a canyon, a hollow, furious noise. Rowan had stopped talking. He had finally, turned to look at the screen. The color drained from his face. The smug, charismatic god surgeon vanished, replaced by a pale, terrified man, lit by the digital bonfire of his own arrogance. The side screens, projecting his image 20 feet high, showed every bead of sweat, every panicked twitch of his eyes. "We seem to be," he stammered, the microphone picking up the new tremor in his voice. "We seem to be having a technical glitch, an error in the projection." He frantically searched the back of the massive auditorium for the tech booth, his hand shielding his eyes, as if that would make the nightmare on the screen disappear. "Can we get this slide down? Just turn off the projection. Turn it off." His voice was rising, cracking on the last word. Then, a new voice cut through the panic. It was female, amplified, and cold as a scalpel. The conference coordinator, a sharp-eyed woman named DeLuca, was speaking from her station at the side of the stage. "Dr. Whitaker," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden, sharp silence. "Your system is live. This is not a glitch." She let a beat pass, long enough for every person in the room to stop breathing. "As per your own presentation," she continued, her tone lethally calm, "this is the live verification data stream. It is reconciling, in real time, with the hospital's primary database." Another beat. "It's working, doctor." The silence that followed was not silence. It was a vacuum. It was the complete and total absence of sound, of movement, of air. Rowan stood frozen, a statue of chalk, crucified by his own flawless creation. And into that vacuum, a hand rose. Front row, center. A man with a silver-gray beard, immaculate in a Savile Row suit, who had been watching the entire spectacle with a look of profound, academic gravity. He did not wait to be called upon. He simply stood. Dr. Elias Martinez, the president of the American Society of Medical Oversight and Curation, the keynote speaker who was to follow Rowan, the man whose editorials in modern medicine could end a technology, a hospital, or a man. He stood, and the weight of the room shifted to him. He looked at Rowan, not at the screen, but at the man. "Dr. Whitaker," he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried to the very back wall. "I believe I have a question regarding your methodology." I sat in the fourth row. My hands were still clasped. My back was still straight. The mask was still in place. But behind it, my heart, which had been a block of ice, began to beat. I was not a patient. I was not a sister. I was a witness, and the truth, at last, was setting us all free. Dr. Elias Martinez did not just stand. He rose. He seemed to draw the very light in the room towards him, a center of gravity in a suit. He walked, not to the podium, but to the center of the stage, taking a secondary microphone from a stunned-looking technician. The silence in the auditorium was no longer a vacuum. It was a pressurized vessel. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice was not loud, but it was absolute. It filled every corner of the room, cutting through the panicked static Rowan had created. "My apologies for this interruption. I will not be starting my own keynote just yet, I believe. A clarification is in order, a moment of professional review, if you will." He turned, his body language the very picture of collegial concern, and faced my brother. The 40-foot screen still blazed with the red alerts of Rowan's malfeasance, a hellish backdrop. "Dr. Whitaker," Martinez began, his tone deceptively mild. "Your presentation, your Aegis protocol, began with a rather pointed insinuation, a descriptor. You spoke of patients who want to be broken, who collect procedures like souvenirs. You were, of course, alluding to a member of your own family." The focus was so intense I felt my skin prickle. I did not move. "My question," Martinez continued, "is a simple one, based on the principles of data integrity you claim to champion, informing that, colloquial, diagnosis of your sister, Dr. Sloan Whitaker. Did you review her complete medical file? Did you analyze the full, comprehensive imaging, the surgical reports, the diagnostic notes, and the documented history of failed conservative care?" Rowan, who was still clutching his own microphone, looked like a man who had been struck. He was pale, his earlier charisma shattered, leaving only the brittle arrogance beneath. "I am a surgeon," Rowan said, his voice tight. "I've been in practice for 15 years. I am more than experienced enough to recognize a pattern when I see one. I don't need to read a file to—" "To what, doctor?" Martinez interrupted, his voice hardening by a single, precise degree. "To form an opinion? To cast aspersions on a colleague's character from a keynote stage? I see. You prioritize experience, then, not data. How fascinating." The sarcasm was so clean, so sharp, it drew blood. Martinez looked down at a tablet he had retrieved from his seat in the front row. "I have here," he said, tapping the screen, "a summary of a case. The patient, who shall for this moment remain anonymous, has provided full, written, and notarized consent for me to share this summary in this exact forum. A 34-year-old woman, a medical professional herself, first presented with, radiating neuropathic pain in the L5 dermatome. Her initial treatment? Martinez began to read, his voice slow, deliberate, each word a hammer blow. First, 6 months of targeted physical therapy, no fault failure. Second, a course of 3 separate epidural nerve root injections, failure. Third, chiropractic adjustment, traction, and a trial of non-opioid pain management, failure. All the while, her condition worsened, documented foot drop, loss of motor function in the left leg, a 20% decrease in reflex response. He looked up from the tablet, his eyes scanning the hushed, horrified crowd. "Only then, gentlemen," he said, and he seemed to be addressing every surgeon in the room. Only after 24 months of documented, protocol-driven, failed conservative care was a multi-level fusion finally, and correctly indicated, an indication, I might add, that was confirmed by 3 separate, independent surgical reviews. This was not a hobby, this was the standard of care. The silence was absolute. The only sound in the massive hall was the low, mechanical hum of the air conditioning, a sound like a distant, indifferent god. Every eye was locked on Martinez, on Rowan, on the burning screen. Then, Martinez pivoted. "Now," he said, his voice dropping, becoming the voice of a man at a morgue. "Let us turn from that case, a case which demonstrates a clear, painful, but methodical adherence to protocol, to the one your system has so helpfully illuminated for us all." He jested, not with his hand, but with his entire body, turning to face the screen. "Subject 7 Alpha, Mrs. Gable, though your system tried to hide her name, the malcontent, the 70-year-old woman whose report of post-operative pain you dismissed." He walked the audience back through the data they had just seen, his words narrating the digital autopsy. A 10-week delay, a 70-year-old woman reported fire in her leg, and the responsible clinician delayed a critical diagnostic MRI for 10 weeks, 3 urgent calls in a single day, and only then, as we saw, was a note entered, a note that was edited. He looked at the tech booth. "Ma'am, the audit log. Can you isolate the specific entry? The edit timestamp from that night." A technician, her face projected on a small side screen, typed furiously. The main screen flickered, and then a single line of code was isolated, magnified. Audit, note, edit, user R. Foster, timestamp 2143.9. "There," Martinez said. "User R. Foster, at 21:43 hours, that is 9:43 at night. Ladies and gentlemen, long after the clinic has closed, long after the patient who made those 3 urgent calls had gone to bed, terrified." Rowan, galvanized by a desperate, last-ditch surge of adrenaline, lunged forward. That's a template. It's an automated note. The system populates those notes when a file is flagged. R. Foster is a resident. It's his automated signature. It's a glitch in the Aegis protocol." He was shouting now, his voice cracking, the feedback whining through the speakers. "A glitch," Martinez repeated. He tasted the word, as if it were a poison, and spat it out. "You are claiming that your flawless protocol, the one you are here to sell, is responsible for this." He looked at the tech booth again. His voice was cold iron. "Ma'am, you still have the live server feed. I want you to pull the session string for user R. Foster from that night. I want to see the login IP address. And furthermore," he said, holding up a hand to silence the new wave of murmuring, "I want you to run a comparative analysis. Cross-reference the exact text of that automated note from Subject 7 Alpha's file with the last 50 patient files handled by Dr. Whitaker's service that were also flagged for performance metrics." "You can't do that," Rowan whispered, a desperate, hollow sound. "I can," Martinez stated. "The system is live, the data is real. Run the query." This time, the wait was longer, 30 seconds, a full minute. The technician typed. The screen went blank, then repopulated with a cascade of text. It was not a graph, it was a list. A list of patient IDs, anonymous, but long. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Martinez's voice was heavy with a profound, academic sadness. The exact same phrasing, the identical automated template note, was not a glitch. It was copied, and it was pasted, across 37 different patient files. 37, all of them marked with critical performance flags from the Aegis system. All of them, like Mrs. Gable. Patients whose complaints were being silenced, not by a glitch, but by a keystroke. He let the image hang. This is not a template, Dr. Whitaker. This is a systematic, manual, and fraudulent effort to clean the data, to defeat your own protocol, to hide the errors, to silence the patients whose outcomes did not fit your perfect, marketable narrative. He turned away from the screen, away from the digital ruin. He faced the audience. His gaze swept the rows, a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, and it passed over me, and for the first time, it stopped. He locked eyes with me. He did not smile. He did not offer pity. He offered a platform. The first file I read, he announced to the hall. The case of the 34-year-old woman, the patient with the clear, documented, unavoidable surgical indications, the patient whom Dr. Rowan Whitaker, from this very stage, characterized as a hobbyist and a souvenir collector. He paused. We have heard his opinion. Now, let us confirm the data. His voice rose, clear and strong, a final bell tolling. Dr. Sloan Whitaker, would you please stand, and would you please confirm, for this entire assembly, that you are, in fact, that patient, and that you have given me your explicit, written authorization to de-anonymize your file and speak the truth of it here today? The auditorium doors hissed open, and it was like breaking the surface of the water. The silence of the hall, which had been so pressurized, so absolute, gave way to the cacophony of the lobby. It was not a walk. It was a gauntlet. People did not look at me directly. They stared past me, their eyes darting away the second I met their gaze, their faces a mural of pity, secondhand embarrassment, and a strange, sharp curiosity. By the time I reached the glass doors of the convention center, my phone, which I had silenced hours before, was a solid, vibrating brick of heat in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. The screen was a waterfall of missed calls and notifications, too fast to even read. The headlines had already been written. The tech bloggers and medical journalists in the audience had not waited for a press release. They had been filing live. Before I had even crossed the street to the parking garage, the first alerts were hitting the public. MedTech Daily was the fastest. Keynote catastrophe. Dr. Rowan Whitaker's Aegis protocol fails, implicates him in data tampering. Live. The City Herald was more salacious. Dr. Mock surgeon's sister on stage. Patient file turns blood red in real time. Video clips were already circulating, the look on Rowan's face as the red flags populated the screen. The moment Dr. Martinez had stood up, my name, Sloan Whitaker, was attached to every one of them. I was in my car, the key in the ignition. When the call I knew was coming finally pushed through, the icon for Mother illuminated the screen. I let it ring 3 times, a small, selfish delay, before I pressed the green button and put the phone on speaker. Sloan. Her voice was not a greeting. It was an accusation. It was thin, high, and vibrating with a fury I had known my entire life. What have you done? I didn't do anything, Mom, I said. My voice was hoarse. Do not lie to me. Do not. Your father and I are watching it. It is everywhere. The news. They are showing the clip. You and that man, Martinez, you set him up. You planned this. Mom, I did not. You are destroying your brother, she shrieked, and the sound was so full of genuine anguish it almost knocked the breath from my lungs. You are ending his career, everything he has worked for, everything we have given him. You are burning it all to the ground. And for what? Because you were jealous? Because he finally called you out? He called me a souvenir collector, I said. the words tasting like ash, in front of 2,000 of our peers. He was making a point. The phone fumbled. I heard my father's roar in the background. "Give me the damn phone, Helen!" A second later, his voice boomed, deep and laced with a command authority that had ruled my childhood. "Sloan, you stop this, now." "Stop what, Dad?" I said, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "I'm in my car. I'm driving home." "Stop this circus. Retract your statement. Tell the press that Dr. Martinez forced you, that the data was a misunderstanding. You need to make a statement supporting your brother. He is on the verge of losing everything. The hospital is calling us. The board is calling us. You have to fix this." A cold, clear calm settled over me. It was the same calm I had felt in the auditorium. "I didn't make a statement, Dad. I just stood up. I didn't touch the data. I didn't manipulate the system. Rowan did. His software did. The data spoke for itself. I am not going to lie for him. Not this time. You are choosing this public performance, over your own blood? Over your family?" "He chose his keynote over me," I replied, the words sharp and final. "The truth is the truth." "You were always cold," my mother wailed, having snatched the phone back. "Always so unfeeling. He is your brother." I pressed the red icon. I ended the call. The next morning, the institutional response began. Northlake Hospital. Realizing it was at the epicenter of a crisis that was now trending on every social media platform, issued its first press release at 8 a.m. It was a masterpiece of corporate platitudes, smelling of panicked lawyers and desperate board members. Northlake University Hospital is aware of the technical discrepancies presented during yesterday's keynote. It read, "We are launching a full, comprehensive internal review to ensure our systems meet the highest standards of data integrity. We are, as always, committed to the highest standards of patient care. We have full faith in the Aegis protocol and in the dedicated staff of our neuroengineering department." It was an attempt to calm the storm, to soothe the shareholders. Northlake's parent company, a massive healthcare conglomerate, had seen its stock dip 3% in pre-market trading. The internal review was not for the patients. It was for Wall Street. But the press release had an unintended and immediate consequence. It opened the floodgates. The hospital could try to control the narrative, but it could not control its staff. The whispers that had followed Rowan for years, of his arrogance, his difficult patience, his miraculously clean data, they now had a focus. They had a name. They had me. My professional email, the one linked to my research profile, began to fill. Anonymous tips from Northlake addresses. "Ask him about the Rinaldi case, 2022. Same thing. Pushed for surgery. Patient got worse. File went quiet. I was the scrub nurse for Mrs. Gable," he said, and I quote, "She's faking it," right after the procedure. Then came the one that mattered. It was not anonymous. It was from a senior oncology nurse, a woman named Beth. The subject line was, "I've been holding this for a year." The body of the message was brief. "He did the same thing to my mother. She died. He called it complications. I'm attaching a screenshot. This was the diagnostic order for her initial scan. He denied it. He personally denied it, citing unnecessary cost. 2 months later, the tumor was inoperable." The attached file was a screenshot from the EMR system, a P-EAT, scan order, status, denied, user, R. Whitaker. I forwarded it, and 7 others, to the public contact address for Dr. Elias Martinez. The hospital's internal review was suddenly running into the brick wall of reality. The legal department, a pack of silent, high-priced sharks, began to move. Mrs. Gable, the malcontent from the presentation, received a call. They offered her a settlement, a significant one, 6 figures, enough to buy a new house, enough to pay for her grandchildren's college. All she had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement. She was not the only one. I heard from 2 other former patients, the ones whose names I'd seen in the anonymous tips. They, too, were offered good faith gestures, to compensate for their less than optimal outcomes. The hospital was not admitting guilt, it was burying the evidence, one checkbook at a time. But the money could not stop the American Society of Medical Oversight and Curation. Dr. Martinez, it turned out, was not just an academic, he was an executioner. ASMOC, the ethics board that held the power to revoke medical licenses, convened an emergency hearing. Dr. Rowan Whitaker was invited to attend and provide clarification regarding the data presented at the conference. It was not an invitation, it was a summons. The family, the institution I had been exiled from, fractured. My phone call with my parents was just the first tremor. The main quake hit 3 days later. My mother's sisters, my aunts, called me, not as a group, but one by one. Aunt Clara, the tough one, was blunt. "Sloan, it's about damn time. Your mother has been protecting that boy since he broke your arm with a baseball bat when you were 7 and claimed you ran into it. We see you, we believe you, we're proud of you." My cousin Mark, a lawyer, offered to review any documents, pro bono, the maternal side of the family. The ones who had always been treated as secondary to the Whitaker patriarchal line were drawing a battle line. They were standing with me. Then a call from my father's brother, Uncle David. "Sloan," he said, his voice thick with disappointment. "Your father is heartbroken. You would take down your own brother, your own family name, for a moment in the spotlight. Whatever he did, he's family. You fix this." The Whitaker name was suddenly, irrevocably, split in two. Rowan, predictably, did not go down quietly. He did not apologize. He did not retract. He hired a public relations firm, a shark of a woman, all teeth in a designer suit, appeared on a morning news show. "This is a coordinated, malicious attack," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "Dr. Whitaker is a pioneer. He has been targeted by disgruntled elements, including a tragically unstable family member, who are jealous of his success. The data seen on that screen was a deep fake, a hack, a digital smear campaign." A smear campaign. He was calling his own software, his own keynote, a lie. The irony was so dense it was almost suffocating. The public, however, was not buying the PR spin. The narrative was too clean, too powerful. My story, my humiliation, had become a catalyst. But the most surprising part was the hashtag. It was not "Listen to Sloan." It was "Listen to Pain." It started with Mrs. Gable's granddaughter. It was picked up by the oncology nurse. It was tweeted, shared, and posted by thousands. Then tens of thousands, people, mostly women, began telling their own stories. Stories of being dismissed by doctors, of being called hysterical, or malingerers, or souvenir collectors, of having their pain, their lived-in burning reality, ignored by clinicians who thought they knew better. I watched all of this from the window of my apartment, the PR spin, the hashtag, the family schism. My phone had become a weapon, a portal to a war I had started by simply existing. It rang again. My father. I looked at the name. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone. The screen went dark. I pulled the charging cable from the wall and put the phone in my desk drawer. I closed the drawer. I picked up my gym bag. I walked to the mirror. My back was aching. The old familiar fire. I still had 2 more months of physical therapy. I still had work to do. The world could scream. The lawyers could circle. The family could shatter. I had to go to my rehab appointment. I had to focus on getting strong. I left the apartment, closing the door on the noise, and walked out into the quiet, cold afternoon. I was, for the first time in my life, entirely on my own, and I was, for the first time, not afraid. The ASMOC emergency hearing was not held in a grand auditorium. It was in a windowless conference room on the 3rd floor of a beige office building, a place designed for depositions and the quiet, bureaucratic dismantling of careers. The air was dry, smelling of old coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. There was no audience. There was only the panel, Dr. Martinez, 2 other senior physicians I did not know, a hospital administrator, and a formidable-looking woman who was introduced as the panel's lead counsel. Rowan was there, seated at a long table with a team of 3 lawyers. He looked diminished, his bespoke suit somehow looking too large for him. I was there, but not at the table. I was in a chair against the wall. A party of interest, present but silent. The first person to speak was not a doctor. She was a woman from a digital forensics firm, retained by ASMOC. She was all business, her hair in a tight bun, her voice a precise monotone. We were asked to perform a full extraction of the Northlake EHR, specifically the backup tapes from the dates in question. She began, addressing the panel. The live system, as we've established, was compromised, but the nightly backups are immutable. We were looking for the creation of the Subject 7 alpha file and its subsequent edits. A screen flickered to life. It was not a slick presentation. It was a command line interface, lines of code scrolling past. We found the edits, as identified by the Aegis protocol, she said. But we found something else, a system-wide macro, authorized and deployed by user R. Whittaker, approximately 18 months prior. Rowan's lawyer, a man with a face like a clenched fist, started to rise. Objection, relevance. The panel's counsel cut him off. Your objection is noted. Mr. Harris, please continue. Ms. Chen. We've named it the Comfort Note Macro, as that was the file name. It was not a template, as Dr. Whittaker claimed. It was a script. When activated, it inserted a pre-written paragraph into a patient's chart. It was a very specific paragraph. She projected the text. Patient reports ongoing subjective discomfort. Lacks objective correlative findings. Pain appears to be psychosomatic in nature. Potential for somatic fixation noted. Recommend continued conservative observation. De-escalate pharmaceutical intervention. A comfort note, Dr. Martinez said, his voice dripping with contempt. A note to comfort whom, Ms. Chen? The data. Doctor, she replied, not missing a beat. The macro was cross-referenced with the Aegis protocol's own performance metrics. We found it was applied almost exclusively to post-operative cases that were beginning to show, quote, negative outcome deviations. In simpler terms, when a patient's post-op recovery was not going well, this note was often applied. But surely, the hospital administrator on the panel said, a clinician would review new imaging, new data, before making such a strong assertion? That's the second part of the script. Ms. Chen said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. We analyzed the user logs. The macro script included a command to bypass a specific system alert. That alert, which we found in the original source code for the EHR, was a pop-up. Patient-reported pain increase exceeds 20% deviation from projected recovery. New diagnostic imaging is recommended. The Comfort Note script automatically clicked no on this prompt before inserting its text. The room was silent. This was not just negligence. This was automated, systematic, active dismissal. Rowan was not just ignoring alerts. He had written a piece of code to ignore them for him. This, Ms. Chen concluded, was not a glitch. It was a feature. The next witness was a man in his late 20s, his face pale and sweating under the fluorescent lights. My name is Dr. Arjun Patel, he stammered. I was a resident under Dr. Whittaker until 6 months ago. Why did you leave the program? The panel's counsel asked. Patel licked his lips. I was not comfortable with the culture, the pressure. Pressure to do what, Dr. Patel? To clean the data, that's what he called it. Cleaning. Dr. Whittaker's fellowship. His funding for the Aegis protocol. It was all based on his flawless surgical outcomes, a 99% success rate, and he said the only thing standing between us and that 99% was patient noise. Patient noise? Martinez repeated. Yes, patients who complained too much. Patients who did not heal on his timeline. He told us that our first duty was to the data. He pressured us to underdiagnose, to delay scans. He said a scan just invites ambiguity. He told me to use the comfort note. Did you use it? Yes, Patel whispered, looking down at his hands. Twice, and then I quit. He was followed by a woman who commanded the room's respect instantly. She was in her 60s, wearing practical nursing shoes and a face of stern, righteous anger. My name is Helen Grady, she announced. I am the charge nurse for the neurosurgical recovery floor at Northlake. I have been for 22 years. She did not wait to be asked. She placed a large, leather-bound book on the table with a solid thud. This is my shift log. We keep it by hand. We do not trust the digital system to tell the whole story. I was on duty on October 28th. She opened the book. 9:15 a.m. Call from patient in room 302, Mrs. Gable. Reports, quote, fire in my left leg. Says she cannot feel her toes. I paged Dr. Whitaker's service. No response. 12:30 p.m. Patient's daughter on the phone. Hysterical. Says her mother is weeping. I went to the room. Patient's foot was cold. I paged Dr. Whitaker's service again. I marked it urgent. A resident, a Dr. Foster, called back and said Dr. Whitaker was in a simulation and that the patient was anxious. 13:55 p.m. Mrs. Gable screamed. The patient in the next bed hit the call button. I ran in. She was trying to get out of bed, saying her leg was dead. I hit the code stroke button, even though it was not a stroke, just to get a response team. Only then did Dr. Whitaker appear. He told me I was overreacting and canceled the code. Her testimony, written in plain blue ink, matched the digital timestamps of the patient's calls precisely. The panel's counsel then produced a new file. We have also received, she said, in the last 48 hours, a file from Mrs. Gable's insurance provider. She held up a letter. This is a denial of coverage from the insurance company for a follow-up MRI, dated November 1st, and I will read the reason for denial. Quote, claim denied. The patient's own clinician's notes, dated October 28th, state the pain is psychosomatic in nature and lack objective correlative findings. Therefore, further diagnostic imaging is not deemed medically necessary. She let the paper fall to the table. Dr. Whitaker's own words, his own comfort note, were used by the insurance company to deny the very scan that would have shown the damage. This was not an isolated incident. We found 3 similar letters, sent to 3 other patients. The doors at the back of the conference room opened. A woman in her 70s, leaning heavily on a walker, slowly made her way in. Her left foot was encased in a heavy black orthopedic brace, the kind used for permanent foot drop. It was Mrs. Gable. She was flanked by her daughter. She did not speak. She simply stood at the back of the room, a silent, living testament to the entire hearing. And finally, the panel's lawyer said, her voice softening but losing none of its edge. We have the audio from the Northlake patient hotline, Mrs. Gable. You have given us permission to play this? Mrs. Gable nodded, her face grim. The lawyer pressed a button. The first call was hesitant. Yes, hello, I am a patient of Dr. Whitaker. I am in so much pain. I think something is wrong. The second call, hours later, was higher, thinner. Please, he is not calling me back. I cannot feel my foot. I am so scared. The third call was not a call. It was a recording of the message she had left. It was just a sound, a woman, weeping, unable to form words, just a raw, desperate sob that went on for 30 seconds before the machine cut her off. Rowan's lawyer, Mr. Harris, finally spoke, his voice sounding hollow. My client, he said, is a visionary, a pioneer. If there were errors, they were not errors of malice. They were errors of a flawed system. An outdated EHR, a confusing user interface. The hospital's own systems are to blame. Dr. Whitaker is as much a victim of this this technological failing, as anyone. Ms. Chen, the forensics expert, who had been silent, leaned forward to her microphone. "That is false," she said. Every head snapped to her. "The system is not outdated. It is a standard, industry-wide EHR. The user interface is not confusing. It is, if anything, overly cautious." It presented the clinician with a choice. It said, "Pain is reported. Do you wish to investigate?" The system did not fail. The logs are clear. This was not a system error. This was a clinical decision. Repeated over and over, the system worked perfectly. It recorded everything. The hearing, it turned out, was not an ending. It was a detonator, the blast radius, which had been focused on Rowan, now expanded, threatening the entire institutional structure of Northlake Hospital. The forensic evidence of the comfort note macro had changed the question. The question was no longer, "What did Dr. Whitaker do?" The question was now, "What did Northlake know?" Dr. Elias Martinez and the ASMO-C panel, having tasted blood, were now hunting. 2 days after the hearing concluded, with a recommendation for the immediate temporary suspension of Rowan's medical license pending a full board vote, the subpoenas arrived, and they were no longer surgical strikes. This was a declaration of war. ASMOC, citing a clear and present danger to public health, issued a broad data subpoena, a legal demand so broad it sent a shockwave through Northlake's executive suites. They did not just want Rowan's files. They wanted everything. They demanded all internal communications, from all senior administrators, for the last 24 months, containing key phrases: diagnostic cost, imaging quotas, patient utilization, efficiency metrics, and AEGIS protocol. They were no longer investigating a rogue surgeon. They were investigating a culture. And in a corporation built on secrets, the first instinct is to leak. The first email appeared on a secure server used by MedTech Daily. It was from the chief financial officer to the heads of department, dated 8 months prior. At the beginning of the third quarter, it was an ice-cold directive, a call to arms against their own patients' needs. "Colleagues," it read, "our diagnostic imaging overhead for the last quarter exceeded projections by 12%. This is an unacceptable burn rate. We must manage patient expectations and significantly reduce our non-essential diagnostic orders. I want to see a 10% reduction across the board by the end of this quarter. Department heads will be held accountable for this metric. Find the efficiencies." Find the efficiencies. It was the corporate term for delay the scan. It was the systemic, financial justification for the comfort note. Rowan, it became clear, had not just been arrogant, he had been a good employee. He had been finding the efficiencies. The leak was a torpedo. The hospital's ethics committee, a body that normally met once a quarter to discuss coffee room etiquette, scrambled. They convened a hurried, closed-door meeting at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, hoping to avoid attention. They failed. A junior resident, whose conscience had been lit on fire by the case of Mrs. Gable, snapped a photo of the meeting agenda, left carelessly on a podium. Emergency session. Review of Case 7 Alpha and administrative protocols. Below, in red. Minutes of this meeting are not for dissemination. The dam was breaking. The institution was turning on itself. I felt the shift from my own apartment. The silence I had cultivated was broken by an encrypted, unknown number. I answered, and the voice on the other end was quiet, hurried, and terrified. "Is this Dr. Sloan Whitaker?" "Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I am one of the vice presidents of medical affairs at Northlake." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, a cold, hard line. "Dr. Whitaker," he said, his voice dropping. "I was in the room when Dr. Whitaker presented the initial funding proposal for the AEGIS protocol. I had reservations then. The data seemed too clean." "Why are you calling me Thorne?" "Because," he paused, "what happened to you? What happened to Mrs. Gable? It is the tip of the iceberg. The board is in full damage control. They are preparing to paint your brother as a lone wolf, to sacrifice him to save the hospital's accreditation. They are going to contain this. But the problem is not one man. It is the policy. It is the pressure from the top down, the pressure I have been part of. What do you want from me? Cooperation, he whispered. You are on the outside. You are a credible voice. We, from the inside, we can provide the documentation, the emails, the real quotas. We can protect future patients. Help us. Help me expose the real policy. I closed my eyes. It was the perfect trap. The administration. Seeing the class action lawsuits forming, seeing their own culpability, was looking for a new narrative. They wanted to pivot, to become the brave whistleblowers who were also victims of Rowan's deception. They wanted to use me, his sister, as their moral shield. Dr. Thorne, I said, my voice as cold and sterile as a new scalpel. I appreciate your sudden commitment to patient safety, but I will not be participating in a curated leak campaign to save Northlake's administration. My position is, and has always been, about the adherence to the standard of care. I am a physician. I am not a character witness, and I am not your accomplice. But without our help, you cannot. If you have documents that prove a systemic policy of denying care, I suggest you send them directly to Dr. Nye Martinez and the ASMO-C panel. I am not, and will not be, an active participant in the case against my brother. I have already given my testimony. My only contribution from here on out will be to provide, if asked by the panel, the medical and ethical framework for proper patient care, the standards. That is all. You are making a mistake, Doctor. You are letting them control the narrative. No, I said, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than ice. The data is controlling the narrative. Goodbye, Dr. Thorne. I hung up. He was right about one thing. The data was everything. While Northlake was busy trying to frame me, Dr. Martinez was busy making their entire defense irrelevant. He was not just looking at the hospital's servers, he was looking at the cloud. The Aegis protocol was not just a local software, it was a cloud-based, real-time analytics platform, and every action, every edit, every keystroke was logged in a separate, third-party, high-security server stack owned by a company in Utah, a company that was legally bound to protect its data's integrity. Dr. Martinez sought and received confirmation from them, the digital signature chain, the one that proved user R. Whitaker and user R. Foster had manually edited files, had bypassed alerts, and had deployed the Comfort Note macro, was absolute, it was unforgeable, it was time-stamped, geotagged, and secured with a level of encryption that made Northlake's "it was a glitch" defense look like a child's lie. The log was not just a hospital file, it was a digital fact, as real and as hard as granite. And as the legal, systemic case was being built, my brother, the man who started it all, was in a television studio, attempting to save himself. His PR team, in a disastrously ill-conceived move, had booked him on a live, primetime news program. They had, I am sure, prepped him for hours. They had given him soft, empathetic answers. They had told him to speak of healing, learning, and system improvements. The host, a woman known for her placid smiles and razor-sharp questions, let him deliver his entire prepared speech. She let him talk for 3 full minutes about his passion for patient outcomes and the unfortunate, complex nature of data. Then she smiled. "That's a very compelling vision, Doctor," she said, "but I am just a simple journalist, and I am confused about the audit log, the one from the cloud provider, the one that ASMOC has confirmed is unforgeable. It shows you personally, deleting patient complaints and overriding safety alerts. How is that a system improvement?" Rowan froze, the mask slipped, the PR-coached calm evaporated, and the raw, seething arrogance I had known my entire life flooded his features. That log," he stammered, "is a misinterpretation of of complex data. It seems very simple, the host pressed, her smile tightening. Did you, or did you not, use a macro to insert the phrase psychosomatic in nature into the file of a 70-year-old woman who could no longer feel her leg? You do not understand the pressure, he snapped. You do not understand the noise we have to deal with. Noise? She asked. You mean patients? I mean, people who do not understand their own bodies. People like my sister. I know her. I have known her my whole life. I know she has a tendency to overstate things. She always has. And now she has convinced all of you. He stopped, but it was too late. He had said it. He had done the one thing his lawyers must have begged him not to do. He had made it personal. He had dismissed me, his sister, and by extension, Mrs. Gable, and the 37 other patients, as hysterical, as liars. I know she has a tendency to overstate things. The quote was a bomb. Before the interview was even over, the clip was on social media. It was cut. It was looped. It was captioned. It was a firestorm. The hashtag listened to Pain exploded. It was now attached to Rowan's face, his voice, his smug, dismissive words. He had, in one live television sentence, confirmed everything. He had become the living embodiment of the medical arrogance that patients, especially women, had been fighting for centuries. The legal response was immediate. The 37 other patients whose files had been cleaned by the comfort note were no longer anonymous data points. They were a unified, organized, and furious group. They had names, they had faces, and now they had an army of lawyers. The class action lawsuit was filed the next morning. It did not just name Dr. Rowan Whitaker. It named Northlake University Hospital. It named the entire executive board. It named the CFO. It sought $500 million in damages. And suddenly, Northlake was faced with the choice it had been desperately trying to avoid. The internal ethics meeting, the one whose minutes were not for dissemination, was now irrelevant. The leaked emails were a sideshow. Rowan's PR interview had been a catastrophe. The board of directors convened. They now had a simple, binary choice. They could circle the wagons. They could protect their star surgeon, the man who had brought in hundreds of millions in grants and prestige. And in doing so, they could fight a class action lawsuit that would bankrupt them and, in all likelihood, cause ASMOC to revoke the entire hospital's accreditation. They could lose everything. Or they could cut him loose. They could sever the limb to save the body. They could offer up Dr. Rowan Whitaker, their pioneer, their asset, their efficiency as a sacrifice. The star, or the hospital, his career, or their very existence, the choice had been made, in the end, by Rowan himself. The war was being waged in hearing rooms and on news channels, but the front line, as it had always been, was my own body, the stress, a constant, low-grade electrical current for weeks, finally found its old pathways. The familiar, sickening fire in my L5 dermatome, the one that had been a dull ache for months, roared back to life. It was a vicious, ironic feedback loop. The battle for my pain's legitimacy was causing the pain itself to return, with a vengeance. It was a Tuesday morning when I woke up and could not feel my left foot. The numbness was not a memory. It was a cold, leaden reality. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded my throat. I sat up, breathing hard, and watched my foot, willing it to move. It was still there, but it felt disconnected, a piece of foreign matter at the end of my leg. I called Maria, my physical therapist, my voice tight. It's back, the numbness. I cannot. Breathe. Sloan, her voice was calm, a rock in my churning panic. It is the stress. The nerves are screaming. It is a flare-up. It is not a re-injury. You are not broken. Do your stretches, the ones for the nerve flossing, and I will see you at 4 this afternoon. Not 10. 4. Do you hear me? I did. I also made another call. To the ASMOC panel's counsel. Ms. Davis, I said, my voice flat. "This is Dr. Sloan Whitaker. I am respectfully informing the panel that I will not be in attendance at the final hearing. My presence. It would be a conflict. And frankly, my testimony is complete. The data is all there. My being in the room, it helps no one, and it harms my own recovery." The lawyer was quiet for a moment. "We understand. Dr. Martinez sends his, well, he said to tell you he respects the boundary. Godspeed on your recovery." Boundary. It was a word I was learning to use as a shield. I did not go to the hearing. I did not watch the news. I did not read the live blogs of the legal train wreck that was my brother's career. Instead, I sat at my dining room table, a heating pad strapped to my back, and I wrote. I had been working on it for weeks. In the quiet hours after midnight, when the pain and the anger kept me awake, it was not a journal. It was a policy memo. I titled it, "A Patient-Centric Framework for the Verification of Post-Surgical Neuropathic Pain, a Data and Empathy Model." It was a direct response to the comfort note. It was the antithesis of the Aegis protocol, where Rowan's system was designed to clean data and manage patient noise. Mine was designed to amplify it. It proposed a mandatory, independent diagnostic review when patient-reported pain exceeded protocol projections by more than 20%. It created a red flag system that was not punitive, but investigative. It required, by mandate, a second opinion review of all new imaging. It was, in essence, a codification of the simple act of listening. It was everything I had needed. It was everything Mrs. Gable had deserved. At 4:00, I was in Maria's clinic. It was not a spa. It was a place of hard work, a room of rubber bands, balance balls, and the quiet, steady encouragement of a woman who saw the human body as a machine that needed proper, respectful maintenance. "The numbness is a signal," she said, her strong hands guiding my leg into a stretch that made me wince. "Your body is telling you that the fight-or-flight system is overloaded. You are living in a state of high alert. So, today, we are not pushing. We are just moving, gently. Remind the nerves that they are safe." "It does not feel safe," I gasped, as she moved my leg. "I know," she said, her voice full of a profound, simple empathy that still felt new to me. "But I am here. This floor is solid. You are not falling. Breathe with me. Sloan, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, again. Good. Now, push against my hand. Just 5%. Good. You are stronger than you think." I left that session walking, not shuffling. The numbness had receded to a tingle. Maria had done more for me in 1 hour than my brother had in a lifetime. When I returned home, there was an email from a colleague, a man named Dr. Ben Carter, who sat on one of ASMOC's subcommittees. "Sloan," it read, "I hope this finds you well. All things considered, I was one of the auditors on the Aegis case. What I saw, it was harrowing. I am also the chair for the statewide physicians conference in the spring. We are retooling the entire keynote series. We are running with a new theme. The patient voice. The entire committee wants, for you to present, not just your story, your new framework, the memo you sent to the panel. Sloan, it is brilliant. It is what we have been missing. Will you consider it? Will you come and teach us how to listen?" I stared at the email, a wave of such intense, unexpected validation washing over me that I had to sit down. He was not asking me to be a victim. He was asking me to be a leader. The moment was shattered by a thud from my mail slot. There was only one piece of mail, a thick, cream-colored envelope, registered mail. I did not need to see the return address. It was my father's stationery. I sat down. I opened it. It was not a letter. It was a verdict. "Sloan," it began, in my father's sharp, angry handwriting. "The final ASMOC hearing is in 3 days. Your brother's life is on the line. He is a good man, a brilliant doctor, who made a mistake under pressure. The pressure you and your allies have created. This family does not air its laundry in public. This family does not tear itself apart. You are a Whitaker. Your first and only duty is to your blood. We demand that you attend that hearing. We demand that you stand, in public, and speak on his behalf. Speak to his character. Speak to the stress he was under. Remind them of his successes. You are the only one who can mitigate this. You are the only one who can save him. If you do not do this, if you choose to side with strangers against your own brother, then you are no longer our daughter. Do not call. Do not write. Do not come home. This is your one and only choice. Save your family or lose it. It was signed, Your Father. I held the thick, expensive paper in my hand. There was no tremor. The ice was back. But it was not the ice of shock. It was the ice of clarity, the ice of a frozen lake, solid and deep and sure. I did not call. I did not email. I took out a single sheet of my own. Simple, white stationery. I took out a good pen, and I wrote a letter back. Dear Father, I wrote, I have received your letter. I understand your position, and I am sorry that it has come to this. I cannot do what you ask. I will not stand in front of a medical ethics board and lie about character. The data is clear. The mistake was not one moment. It was a pattern, a policy, that has permanently disabled at least one woman and harmed dozens more. You say my first duty is to my blood. I am a physician. My first duty is to my oath. My duty is to the patients. My duty is to the truth. I am not choosing strangers over my brother. I am choosing the truth over a lie. I am choosing patient safety over family pride. I am, and will always be, your daughter. I hope one day you will understand what that means. I will not be at the hearing. With love, Sloan. I sealed it. I would mail it tomorrow. That night, sleep was impossible. The ultimatum, the conference invitation, the returning pain. It was a storm inside my head. I got up at 3 in the morning, the digital clock glowing red. I went to my computer. I did not look at the news. I did not look at social media. I had, weeks ago, set all my accounts to private, locking the doors against the rage and the pity of the outside world. I opened a file. It was a folder on my desktop labeled Case. I clicked it. My own X-rays loaded, stark and clinical. My own MRIs. The slices of my spine, gray and white. I zoomed in. I traced the black line of the nerve. I saw the impingement. I saw the crushed disc. I saw the before and the after. The cold, beautiful, functional architecture of the titanium fusion that now held me together. This was not psychosomatic. This was not overstating. This was not a souvenir. This was physics. This was anatomy. This was real. I was real. My pain was real. I closed the file as the sun began to lighten the sky. 2 days later, I had an appointment. My old spine surgeon, the one who had finally listened to me, was part of Rowan's department. I could not go back. I had found a new one, across town, in a different hospital system. A man named Dr. Nikhil Reyes. He was young, kind-eyed, and he had not, for 1 second, looked at me with pity. He had my entire file, all 2 years of it, on the screen in front of him. He looked at it. He looked at me. Well, he said, turning to me, first, let me just say, I am so sorry. What you went through, the 24 months of failed conservative care, the delay, it is unconscionable. The documentation on your foot drop, they should have operated a year earlier. I did not know what to say. I just nodded. So, he said, I am not here to talk about that. I am here to talk about today. You mentioned on the phone that the stress is causing a flare-up. Tell me, right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is the pain? And for the first time in what felt like a decade, I did not have to brace for an argument. I did not have to marshal my evidence. I did not have to prove it. He had already read the file. He already believed me. It is a 7, I said, my voice thick. Okay, he said, nodding, already typing. A 7 is not acceptable. Let's talk about a non-opioid nerve blocker to get you through this flare-up, and I want to adjust your physical therapy referral. Maria is excellent, but I want to add some aquatic therapy. Take the load off. He was just a doctor, a good one. I was in my car, waiting at a red light, when I heard two women talking on the street corner. Their voices drifted through my open window. Yeah, my brother-in-law. He is having a minor surgery, but, he is making a huge deal of it. Minor surgery. The words hit me like a slap. My breath caught. My chest tightened. I felt the hot, familiar sting behind my eyes. I saw the hearing room. I saw my father's letter. I saw Rowan's face on the television screen. I did not cry. I closed my eyes. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. I am not hysterical. I am not overstating. I am real. The light turned green. I drove home. When I checked my email that evening, there was a new one. It was from the Asthma Council's office. It was a single, clinical, PDF attachment. Dear Dr. Whitaker, the body of the email read, attached you will find the final report and disposition from the panel. The board has voted. The decision is final and will be made public in 24 hours. I looked at the attachment. I did not open it. The outcome, whatever it was just a fact. I had lost my family. I had lost, in many ways, my old life. But I had found my own voice. I had found my own spine. I closed the laptop. I was ready. Whatever it said, I was ready. I sat at my kitchen table, the laptop open. The email from ASMOC was a single line. The PDF attachment, a simple, blue icon. I clicked it. The file opened. It was 27 pages long. The final report and disposition. I did not need to be in the room. The room was brought to me. In cold, black, clinical text. The report detailed the final hearing. It listed the evidence entered into the permanent record. Exhibit A, the immutable cloud-based audit log. Exhibit B, the comfort note macro code. Exhibit C, the testimony of Nurse Grady and Dr. Patel. And then, Exhibit D, a 22-minute video clip from the MedTech keynote address, dated October 26th. They had entered the keynote. His performance, his mockery, his souvenir collector line had been entered as evidence against him. The hubris had been catalogued. I scrolled down. The report noted the shift in Northlake's strategy. Their lawyers, in their closing statements, had performed a full 180-degree pivot. They were no longer defending Dr. Rowan Whitaker. They were appalled by his rogue actions. They disavowed his methods. They offered full transparent cooperation and begged the panel to see the institution's commitment to immediate and sweeping reform. They had cut him loose, just as Dr. Thorne had predicted. They sacrificed the star to save the hospital. Then, the verdict. The words blurred, and I read them twice. It is the panel's unanimous decision that Dr. Rowan Whitaker's license to practice medicine in this state be suspended for a period of 12 months. 12 months, an entire year. It was not a slap on the wrist. It was a career-ending blow, or at least, a career-altering one. The terms were brutal. Following the suspension, he would be required to complete 1,000 hours of remedial ethics training and 200 hours of basic clinical diagnostics. If he ever practiced again, it would be under mandatory direct supervision by an ASMOC-appointed physician for no less than 36 months. As for Northlake, they had signed a consent decree. They had avoided losing their accreditation, but at a high cost. They were legally bound to implement a new patient pain verification protocol, a protocol based almost entirely on the framework I had submitted. They were mandated to install new software alerts that could not be bypassed, alerts that triggered a mandatory second opinion review if post-operative pain exceeded established norms by more than 15%. The media, when the report went public 24 hours later, was definitive. The headlines were not salacious. They were final. The aegis failed. Doctor suspended. Northlake agrees to sweeping reforms. One paper ran a simple, elegant headline: Truth, illuminated on a keynote stage. My phone lit up, not with calls, with texts. From my father: You have destroyed this family. From my mother: Your brother is broken. I hope you are happy. From an uncle: Shame on you. I looked at the messages. I saw the words, but they felt like they were from a long way away, from another life. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I just felt quiet. I pressed the power button. I turned the phone off. I did not reply. 2 days later, a different kind of message arrived. An official email from Dr. Elias Martinez. Dr. Whitaker, it began. The panel thanks you for your courage, but this is not a letter of thanks. It is a letter of recruitment. The patient pain verification protocol you designed is not just a good idea. It is the new standard of care, but a standard is only as good as the people who teach it. ASMOC is creating a new position, Director of Clinical Standards, overseeing statewide training. The post is yours, if you want it. We need someone who understands, from both sides of the scalpel, what is at stake. I read the email 3 times. Director of Clinical Standards. He was not just offering me a job. He was offering me a new purpose. He was handing me the tools to dismantle the very culture that had broken me. I accepted. My first day was not in a fancy office. It was in a lecture hall, much like the one where Rowan had imploded. But this room was full of third-year medical residents, their faces young, tired, and eager. I put up my first slide. Case File A, a study in complex diagnostics. The case, of course, was mine, anonymized, stripped of names, but the facts were all there. The 24 months of failed therapy, the foot drop, the dismissed pain, the delayed imaging. This patient, I said, my voice steady, echoing in the quiet room, reported pain at a 9. The clinician, as you can see, wrote somatic fixation. Today, we are going to walk through, click by click, why that note was not just a mistake, but a failure of our primary oath. We are going to learn how to listen. My work life was changing. So was my physical one. You are not living in a war zone anymore, Sloan, Dr. Reyes told me at my 6-month checkup. The stress has abated. Your nerves are calming down. Your body is healing. I think you are ready to move. He adjusted my rehab protocol. Less stretching, more strength, less caution, more living. 2 weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, I put on my running shoes. I walked out my front door. I walked to the end of the block, and I kept going. I walked to the park. I walked the full 3-mile loop. I did not wince. I did not limp. The numbness was gone. My foot met the pavement, solid and sure. It was the first time in almost 4 years I had moved without fear, without pain. I stood at the top of the hill, breathing hard, the sun on my face. I heard, through a colleague, that Rowan had taken a job. After his 12-month suspension, he had surfaced in a small, rural hospital in another state. He was working, as the verdict demanded. Under the direct supervision of an older, semi-retired surgeon, he was, as the colleague put it, a ghost. He did his work, he did not speak, and he ran from any camera, even the one on a cell phone. A year passed. The Case File A module I had designed was no longer just for residents. It was now a mandatory part of the curriculum in every medical school in the state. The Sloan-Whitaker Protocol, as some had started to call it, was becoming the new standard. That evening, I was on my own small porch, watching the sunset. The air was cool. I was holding a cup of tea. My back was straight. I had not needed a heating pad in months. I thought of the phone calls I no longer received. I thought of the holidays I now spent with friends, or with Maria's family, or in the quiet company of Dr. Reyes. The price had been high. The victory was not a celebration. It was not the thrill of watching my brother fall. I took no joy in his ruin. My victory was the quiet. It was the knowledge that, tonight, a patient, somewhere, was telling a doctor her pain was a 9, And that doctor, because of the work I had done, was finally listening. The victory was not in tearing a family apart. It was in putting the patient back at the center of the story, right where they had always belonged, even if it had cost me everything. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below and let us know where you are listening from. We love to interact with you and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give us extra support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.